Hello, and welcome back to our mini series of speaking to women in transport here at SYSTRA. I'm joined today with the wonderful Charlotte, who is the discipline lead for tunnels and ground engineering. Welcome, Charlotte. So, tell us all, what is tunnels and ground engineering here at SYSTRA?
Oh, that's a great question. It's basically anything to do with engineering that touches the ground. So it's a simple way of capturing it. It's not as simple. The ground holds quite an enormous amount of risk. A lot of the work that we're doing on HS2 is all groundworks related. But yeah, in simple terms, if it touches the ground, my team gets involved.
Amazing. So, tell us about how you got into this role and just kind of your snapshot of your career to date.
So I grew up in a town called Bristol, or city called Bristol, should I say? And I was surrounded by the Avon Gorge. For anybody who knows Bristol, it's a rather large gorge that a river has incised out. And I've always loved rocks. I've always loved the natural environment, and I always knew that that was going to form some part of my career. Ended up going and doing a geology course at Bristol University. And there was no plan, there was no pathway, there was no career, there was no definition. And one of the modules that I sat was run by what I would call a legacy in the industry of Brian Hawkins. And he inspired me and showed me that there was a possibility of forming a career, something that paid the wages in an area that I had a passion and love for. So ended up finding a way to get into engineering geology, starting off by playing with soil and rocks and logging things coming out of the ground, and ended up going more down the design route, did a postgraduate degree in engineering geology. Every move was filling a gap, so looking at an interest or a passion or an area that I'd not done before. So rather than it being a plan, from birth, I always wanted to be an engineering geologist or a geotechnical engineer. I didn't even realise it existed as a teenager. I think as a teenager, I wanted to be a pharmacist.
Oh, wow.
So completely different directions to what my career plan was as a 16-year-old sitting GCSEs. But looking back with the benefit of hindsight, it was one of those career pathways. If I'd had somebody come into university, from university or from a company, come in and do a STEM talk, I probably would have realised that's what I wanted to be when I grow up. So
Yeah, and that's amazing. I think, well, you touched upon it, the fact that having those conversations early
yeah,
for STEM and, really, especially for women as well coming into this industry, having those early conversations being like, just so you know, this is out there, or it could, it could have made that decision slightly easier for you. Not that you wouldn't have got to where you are now, but being so susceptible to opportunities, I think, is really key as well. I've come from a geography background. I did a bit of geology. I did a physical geography degree. And if you asked me at uni what you're going to do, I didn't have an absolute idea. I knew I enjoyed the environment. I knew I enjoyed consultancy from kind of experience that I'd had and work experience. And then I kind of came out of uni and fell into the world of transport. But as you said, if someone had come in earlier,
yeah.
maybe I probably would have still made the same decision, but I would have been slightly more focused.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. More planned. I think it's giving me awareness of what is
Mm.
possible. There's so many career paths out there, so many possibilities of employment and a role that you can undertake. Sometimes it's not really understanding how something you really enjoy, something that gives you passion, something that motivates you. You can actually get paid for doing that.
Yeah.
So I am a proud owner of two children. And for both of them, they have a key stage 2, I think it is, where you do soils and rocks.
Yeah.
So I offered up to the school to say, well, I'm kind of a professional in soils and rocks. Would you like me to come in and help you out and take one of the lessons and teach the kids about what I do as a job and the fact that you can get paid for liking soils and rocks. And even that, year on year, I've been doing that since my eldest had his first one. So, COVID impacted, obviously. Been doing it for probably 5-6 years now. And the joy on the kids' faces, because every kid runs around, they've got a pebble in the pocket, So bringing those in and just, showing me, Miss, what's it? I'm really sorry, that's a bit concrete, but, why don't we think about it as man-made conglomerate? Just having them interact with you and having them see that actually this is something that I could get a job out of, and also, oh, there's a lady or a woman or a mummy, and that mummy gets paid to have this really quite high profile job and working on these exciting projects.
Yeah, I think you touched on it perfectly there in terms of, your kids see what you do day to day,
Yeah.
but also your children's friends and their classmates actually are like, oh, that's what she does, and she's a wonderful mum, but she's also this amazing engineer, and she's got this amazing portfolio of projects behind her, and that's what she's doing while we're at school. Like that, it's so important, I think, to enrich kids' lives in that way, and then they can think, maybe I'd like to do that one day, because you do tend to see it. I mean, I've got friends who are doctors when their parents are doctors, but it's
Yep.
not to say that it can't work on in these industries. Your mum and dad might come from a planning background and that's how you've gone into it, but if your parents aren't in that realm, at least having those conversations with you going into schools,
Yeah.
you can have that enrichment. So kind of touching upon that, how steps have been taken forward within your own career, have you felt there's been potentially any barriers or anything that you've had to overcome, especially being a woman in this industry?
Oh, absolutely. So it's keeping it positive. I think most women of my generation have come across some level of barrier, be it unconscious bias, be it a presumption when you come into an office that you're the administrative assistant or the person that would go and make a cup of tea, or a presumption that you're not capable or don't want to go and get your hands dirty. So yeah, there's been various levels of barriers, but not insurmountable. I'm fortunate I haven't had some of the extreme versions about barriers and unpleasant behaviours that some of my co-workers have experienced with levels of harassment. So touch wood, and I'm thankful that I've not had to endure that experience. Um, but one of the things I'm very passionate about is talking about the barriers I have had, or the barriers that, with the benefit of hindsight and a bit of reflection, at the time I might not have been aware of, but can now articulate and realise actually that was a professionally imposed barrier, that was a male imposed barrier, that was a company imposed barrier, or in some instances actually it was a personally imposed barrier based on a preconception that actually, as a woman, this is how I'm supposed to live my life. So I am vocal. I am articulating some of those barriers to share the experiences, not because I think my position is one that I'm the most entitled to talk about that, but more to be a champion to help remove those barriers for others. Because I think the more honest people are, the more open people are, the more people identify with and go, oh, actually, yeah, that's a barrier I've experienced as well, but I didn't really see it like that. I didn't realise that was a progression barrier because of my gender. I just thought that was the way the world worked. So I think the more people openly share in a positive and constructive and let's fix things way, I think it improves year on year, decade on decade. And definitely I know that there have been women who've trailblazed in front of me. And that means I have a pathway that I can then form, keep open, and ensure gets improved for those that follow behind me.
100%. And where I am in my career, I'm 6 years into my career, and I definitely have benefited from the women who have come before me in setting out that path, whether that's I can see myself in discipline lead roles because there is a woman sitting in that position, or whether these conversations are more open now and they should continue to be more open, because it's whether, as you said, that's a barrier that I'm facing but I didn't realize it was a barrier, or maybe that isn't a barrier that affects me, but at least I'm aware of it, so people who are facing it, you can have that allyship. And I think that's across men and women. That's not just only for the women to talk about. It needs to be a across everyone conversation. So thank you for being the trailblazer to help other people coming through. Really is noticed. So then kind of touching upon that, what would you like to see come forward? What are those next steps that either they're in progression and they're started, or actually you're like, I think this would be a very important turning point?
I think the one that I'd like to see improve more is retention of women in mid-career. As I've already mentioned, I'm a mother. Coming back after parenthood was difficult. Everybody's experience is going to be difficult. But being cognizant and recognizing that there's not a single solution, it needs to be a culture that embraces women wanting to retain their role. But the role might need to change a little bit. It might be that, whereas for somebody who might be in project delivery, they might not be as agile to be able to go out on sites anymore. Actually, that doesn't mean they can't do the role. It just means that the role needs to slightly pivot, slightly change. But the skills and the qualities that come from being a parent actually might be better, more suited for leadership. Yeah, one of the things that I've spoken about previously with some women that I mentor is actually I've realised being a parent in its own right is quite good for dealing with conflicts. I'm pretty sure most parents out there will identify that if you have more than one child, they do tend to bicker, and sometimes conflict resolution is a good skill that comes out of that. But having women, females there who are able to be that role model and be present and be visible for you to identify with, I think is incredibly important. But that only happens when you retain them in the industry. And there does seem to be a big step off at a certain age, which happens to coincide. Not going to say there's causality, there's coincidence. That happens to be when females start thinking, I'm going to start using biological gifts given to me, and coming back from that is difficult, particularly with the often requirements of flexible working, because unlike work, schools have 13 weeks holiday, not 5. So there is a bit of a disconnect between how you manage and maintain being a working mother and a working parent. And this isn't just saying this is a female only thing, it's working parents in addition to a working mother.
Yeah, definitely. And I think these conversations are really important to have, not only to support those who are currently mothers, but also, there could be people who are making that decision whether they would like children. And all these conversations are so important because it's like you need to know what the workforce is going to look like when you return, or if you're about to return, it's, when I'm keeping in touch, when I am kind of in that maternity leave, my skills are still there. When I come back, yes, I'll need adjustments, but I'm still as brilliant as I was before I left. So then it is maintaining those conversations, and SYSTRA definitely are having these conversations and speaking to women who are going on maternity, have come back from maternity, to make sure, was there something that we can improve on? How was your experience? And really building from that. So just touching upon your kind of flexible working, how have you found that? And just kind of in terms of like the project delivery, how is that kind of working?
So I'm reflecting on my entire career rather than SYSTRA experience to start with, because I'm going to be entirely honest. The first step after having children was unpleasant. The request for flexible working was given, but you used the word, and it will come into my brain in a second. But the ability to have the capabilities and skills is still there. But in my very first instance of coming back on flexible working, there was a work instance where it's like, well, we might consider you for promotion if you can demonstrate you still have those abilities and skills. So it was an automatic presumption that parenthood does something to your brain and takes away your ability to cognitively function in the same way. So there is still negativity, that was more than a decade ago. But there has been improvements. I would say my opinions on flexible working are pre-COVID, post-COVID. COVID did have, as much as a massive detrimental impact on society, a positive impact for the realisation that flexible working is possible. Up until COVID, flexible working was always seen as a a barrier, an issue, how can we work with this person? Because they're not in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5. It makes it difficult. But with having the pandemic, with having flexible work, people working at home and working more globally, everyone was forced into that step change, the culture change. And I think that will only help and benefit retaining that mid-career workforce, because that means that everybody had to do the same thing. So it wasn't everyone's trying to go against the flow changed direction. So as much as it was a negative societal problem from a flexible working embracing, it was a massive culture change that was needed. SYSTRA has been a complete breath of fresh air compared to some other companies I've worked for. Before I even started having interviews in relation to the role, and the role that I have is an incredibly senior role. I look after a UK-wide team of 40 people. My flexible working, the fact that I was 3 days a week wasn't a problem. It was how can we support you and ensure you can come in? Because what was seen was the skills, the capabilities, the qualities, not the difficulties, this isn't a 5-day-a-week person. So breath of fresh air compared to feeling like you're treading through treacle with some other companies where you would come in and the job description would say full-time. The job description would say fully flexible in the UK. The job description would say have to travel at short notice. That doesn't mean I don't do that. I'm down here in Birmingham with you today. My base office is in York. Last night I was in London. So making a presumption on a female behalf, on a woman in engineering's behalf, actually if you engage with the person and find out what is capable and what is possible, it's for that person to find how they can make that happen. And that is from communication and clarity and not presuming that somebody cannot do the role. It's having the conversation of actually you've got the skills and quality, you have a flexible working need, but actually we can help you because you put the right support network in place.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, like what you're talking about in terms of ultimately for a company to get the best out of you, you need to be the best version of you.
Absolutely.
And if that is, you need to adhere to how I work best, and that's my flexible working arrangement or whatever that might be for various different reasons. You're going to get all of me when I turn up because I've had that kind of, that personal work-life balance, and that's so important across many different things. And I think as well, not only from a mother point of view, you're not just getting me and I'm also a mother. That is part of you. And actually, even within your work, whether that's design-led aspects or whatever it may be, those lived experiences will come through your work. And actually, that is so important to especially what we do in designing and creating those environments that's really safe and accessible to all. The last thing I want to ask you is if you had to give one piece of advice to someone on how to build a successful career, what would be your one thing?
Believe in yourself, but to believe in yourself, know who yourself is. And that sounds incredibly Bristolian. I am a Bristol, but hopefully the content is there for the meant support. If you're trying to go against your value system, if you're being unauthentic, you're never going to get the best version of yourself. I'm 25 plus years into my career, 23, 24 years into my career, and I'm still learning. And I've learned more about myself in this past year than I did the year before and the year before that. But you change constantly, a relevant agenda, and knowing what drives you, what motivates you, what your career pathway is or is not, whether or not you identify with a career pathway. If you don't know that about yourself, you're not going to bring your best version of yourself through. But don't do it in isolation. Have a mentor, have a support network, have peer groups. You don't have to be the one that shines by themselves because you can shine as a group of stars and be a universe and a galaxy. You don't have to be an independent sun. So that would be my biggest career advice to people is don't go it alone. Know who you are and be true to yourself, be authentic, be humble, and be the best version you can.
No, I really like that. That is really good advice. And I think, be yourself, because you will get the best out of it for everyone. Thank you so much for such an honest conversation. I've really learned a lot from that and I really appreciate it.
No worries.
And thank you everyone for listening. If you'd like to check out more about SYSTRA, please look across the social media channels or on the website. Thank you very much.